We'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's almost time. Well, it is time actually, you lucky people. I was about to say it's almost time for Dewbs, but it flies when you're having fun. It's 6 o'clock already. That means it's time for us to get stuck into the debate. Now, the new president of Argentina, Javier Milei, he has ruffled more than a few feathers. He says the Falkland Islands must be returned to Argentina. Do you think we would ever see a time where Britain would go back to war for the Falklands? I'll be talking to a man I massively respect, Falklands veteran Simon Weston, about that. Also, Keir Starmer, he has joined calls for more women to be involved in politics. Is that what we need, more women? If so, how do we achieve that? Do we want things like all women shortlists extended? Really? And speaking of politics, the Young Conservative Network have now distanced themselves from the Tories. I'm asking you tonight, is the Conservative Party perhaps focusing too much on the elderly and failing the youth? And a UK minister has said that the disabled must, I quote, do their duty and go out to work if they're able. Is she right? And the BBC is under fire because of an episode of University Challenge, which basically had a contestant who wore the colours of the Palestinian flag while displaying a mascot of a blue octopus. Many people are outraged, saying it was blatant anti-Semitism. Was it? Yes, we'll get into all of that and more. But before we do, let's cross live for tonight's latest headlines.
Michelle, thank you very much and good evening. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. Police searching for a group of missing teenagers say they've recovered 4 bodies from a crashed car in North Wales. A major search was launched after Javon Hurst, Harvey Owen, Wilf Henderson and Hugo Morris failed to return home from a camping trip in the Snowdonia area on Sunday. Police confirmed their car left the road near Tremadog. Superintendent Owain Llewellyn says it appears to have been a tragic accident.
Shortly after 10 a.m. this morning, a member of the public contacted us reporting a vehicle having left the road between Beddgelert and Llanfrothen. Police officers attended and located a Ford Fiesta vehicle upside down, partially submerged in water. Tragically, the bodies of 4 young males were recovered from within the vehicle.
The national living wage will increase by almost 10%. More than 2 million full-time workers are set to benefit from a pay rise of more than £1,800 a year from next April. The announcement comes ahead of tomorrow's autumn statement. Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Laura Trott, says it will help end low pay in the country.
It's fantastic news. We're announcing the biggest ever increase to the national living wage. It's worth £1,800 for a full-time worker. It's going up by 9.8%. That's £11.44 per hour. This is a pay rise for up to 3 million workers and is part of our commitment to make sure that we make work pay and that we eliminate low pay.
US officials say a tentative deal between Israel and Hamas that could see a pause in fighting and the release of hostages has been agreed. The deal would include the terror group releasing 50 hostages, mostly women and children, in exchange for 150 Palestinian prisoners and a pause of 4 or 5 days. US President Joe Biden says they've been working on a deal to get hostages out and are very close. The COVID inquiry has been hearing evidence from Sir Chris Whitty, who was the government's most senior medical advisor during the pandemic. The inquiry's heard the pandemic plan in place before COVID-19 was woefully deficient. Sir Chris said it had been drawn up by people who'd been through the swine flu, where the mortality rate was quite low. He also said policy decisions regarding quarantining were difficult.
If I were to rerun this period again, and I think it's important to be reflective, the thing which we didn't, I think, consider enough was, should we be asking people coming back from China to self-quarantine, irrespective of symptoms, for probably 10 or 14 days. We were beginning to do so on the basis of symptoms.
The Prime Minister has defended the decision to hand tough sentences to climate protesters who caused major disruption. It comes after the UN raised concerns over the sentences handed to protesters who scaled the Dartford crossing last year, saying they were significantly more severe than those imposed in the past. Rishi Sunak defended those tough penalties, saying the protesters were selfish and intent on causing misery to the hard-working majority. Lancashire Police has been criticised for its handling of the disappearance of Nicola Bulley. A review found failings in the way personal information about Ms Bulley's health struggles was disclosed to the press, which contributed to wild speculation. It said that non-reportable background information should have been provided to the media to help shape responsible reporting without disclosing sensitive information. College of Policing CEO Chief Constable Andy Marsh admitted the way the police released the information was needless.
One of the decisions which has arguably the most significant impact on public confidence was the release of personal information about Nicola's health. We found that due process was followed in this decision and that it was lawful, but we are in no doubt that releasing this information in the manner the constabulary did was both avoidable and unnecessary.
The Duke of Sussex's lawyers plan to ask ministers for permission to use confidential documents from the Leveson inquiry in the case against the publisher of the Daily Mail. Associated Newspapers is accused of engaging investigators to use listening devices which were placed in cars and recording private telephone conversations. The publisher says the case is lurid and preposterous. The King and Queen have welcomed the South Korean president at Horse Guards Parade. The royal couple are hosting Yoon Suk-yeol and his wife at Buckingham Palace. It's the first incoming state visit since the King's coronation and the second of his reign. A state banquet will take place this evening, which is set to host 170 guests. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now back to Michelle.
Thanks, Tatiana and Michelle Dewberry, with you till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, the live peer in the House of Lords, Baroness Jacqueline Foster, and the editor of Labour and Cut, Atul Hatwell. Good evening to both of you. You're very welcome tonight. As are all of you at home, what is on your mind tonight? You can get in touch all the usual ways. You can email me, gbviews@gbnews.com, or you can tweet me at GBNews. Mike tweeted me already, very keen tonight, Mike, saying that I'm body-shaming Nigel Farage because I just said I didn't appreciate seeing his backside on I'm a Celebrity. Just to be absolutely clear, and for the record, I'm nothing personal towards Nigel. I don't want to see any of my colleagues' backsides, thank you very much, would you? Ugh, can't think of anything worse. Anyway, keep your thoughts on lots of topics coming in tonight. A packed show. I want to talk to you about whether or not disabled people should have to go out and work if they're able to. I want to ask about that episode of University Challenge. Have you seen that? BBC under fire again. More women in Parliament. Do we need that? Is that the answer? And are the Tories neglecting the young in order to focus too much on the elderly. That one will get you talking, I'm absolutely sure. But let's kick into my top story tonight. Let's look backward, shall we, and remind ourselves of what was quite a pivotal moment in British history.
The commander of the operation has sent the following message. Be pleased to inform Her Majesty that the White Ensign flies alongside the Union Jack in South Georgia. God save the Queen.
What happens next, Mr. Knott?
Thank you very much.
What's your reaction,
Rejoice at that news and congratulate our forces and the Marines.
Are we going to declare war?
Yes, you remember that? That was the then Defence Secretary John Knott and, of course, Margaret Thatcher. They were rejoicing, one of the key moments of the Falklands War. I do have to love her manner with the press there. Can you imagine Rishi Sunak talking like that to the media? Some would say perhaps they would appreciate if he did. Anyway, fast forward to today, and you'll be familiar with the fact we've got a new president in Argentina. Well, he's called quite a few things by a few people. Here he is, waving a chainsaw around. He's promised to do an awful lot of things, so he has. But basically what he's saying is going to stop the banks from printing all this money that he reckons has got Argentina into the mess that it's currently in. Anyway, one of the other things that he mentions is that he reckons that the Falklands returning to Argentina is non-negotiable, saying that the territory is ideally, in his mind, anyway, and I can tell you now, you don't agree with this. Lots of you have already got in touch saying, what does he mean, return it back to Argentina? It's not theirs to begin with. Anyway, Rishi Sunak's having none of this. He says the sovereignty for the Falkland Islands is not up for debate. So there's absolutely no doubt that the Falkland Islands are indeed British. So with that in mind, let's cross now to a man I respect massively. I know many of you will too. I talk, of course, of the Falklands veteran Simon Weston, CBE, who joins me now. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. What do you think when you hear the new president of Argentina talking like this about the Falkland Islands?
I think he's quite deluded, really. He needs to understand that they were the nation of states. They were never even a country when he claims that they were in charge of it. The fact is that the Falklands is an independent territory that chooses whose sovereignty they live under. And they choose our laws, they choose our flag, they choose our parliament. Sometimes I wonder whether that's wise, but they choose our parliament. And the right to self-determination, freedom and democracy, it's non-negotiable. We do not throw that away for them. The islanders choose to be British, and that's what they should have. It's not down to some guy who consults his psychic to find out how his dog is thinking about his decision-making on what to do next. And that's a fact. That's what this guy does. But, you know, he's deluded. You know, we see far too many power politics played in the world. We've only got to look at Mr. Putin and what he's done. You know, and this guy is doing the same thing. You know, they have robbed their military from any funding. So they've not got a military now. So, you know, he can't threaten or offer that he's not going to threaten military action. They haven't got a military to provide any action. So I think that's a nonsense. And, yeah, this guy needs to check his reality, deal with the corruption in his own country first, and then start talking to people about how they can trade with, how they can work with people.
Yeah, and I mean, at this stage, just to be absolutely clear, he's talking about doing all of this diplomatically, he says. One of my viewers has been in touch, Gary. He says, Michelle, the Falklands are strategically important to the UK. Do not underestimate it. He says, I was serving when we liberated them last time, and I wouldn't hesitate doing it all again if we needed to. Do you think that is a sentiment that would be echoed by many veterans?
I think most of us are way too old now, but the sentiment is correct. Look, these are British subjects. They want to be British. They have their own autonomy, and they should be entitled to sleep soundly in their beds at night. It's not for somebody from a country that has got raging inflation because of the corruption of that country. These people should not have this inflicted on them. And people who say, give the islands back to the Argentinians, they never belonged to the Argentinians. Get your history correct. People have tried over the last 5, 10 years to cancel history or alter history by the removal of different effigies. The fact of the matter is the Falklands never belonged to the Argentinians. They've only ever belonged to France and Britain. France, they couldn't make it work. We put Scottish families in there that did make it work. And the fact of the matter is the islanders have had a referendum where 97% of the islanders said they wanted to remain under British sovereignty. That's about as decisive as you can get. And the Argentinians who were based in the Falklands were asked why they live there. And they were the ones who were the 3%. They were asked why they lived there. And they said, oh, because of the education, because of the health service, and because the police are not corrupt. And then they said, why did you vote? One of my friends asked them, why did you vote to be Argentinian then? And they couldn't answer him. Why would you want to throw up the democracy that they've got? And they've got a thriving community. They have a real stable lifestyle there. Why would you want to throw that away and go with a country that has clearly proven itself over the years to have such corrupt politicians?
Well, there you go. That is indeed the billion-dollar question. And I think perhaps the answer to that will be that they absolutely don't want to do that. But for now, Simon Weston, thank you very much for your time. A man that I respect greatly. Thank you. What's your thoughts on this whole topic?
Well, I think Simon said everything, pretty well everything, and explained it. You know, it's a long time ago. It seems to have gone so quickly. But where he's absolutely right, you know, you've got a self-governing British overseas territory, and that is how it should remain. I think it's a great tragedy because you've got this wonderful country called Argentina, and up until, you know, 100 years ago or even less than that, I mean, we did 10% of our trade was with Argentina. People may remember corned beef from Fray Bentos corned beef, and they helped, you know, they used to export that to the UK during the war. And, of course, then their politics sort of declined, and then the military junta came in with Galtieri, which caused the Falklands. And they seem to have lurched after that. And now, obviously, they've got a new leader in who, it's not up for debate, but I'm not surprised at all, because very often in these countries there will be a specific subject that they'll use.
Yeah, Grant Shapps as well, he was talking tough on his Twitter today. He was basically having absolutely none of it, I can tell you that. Atul, what do you make to it all?
I think Simon said it all. The one question I would have, even though the Argentinians don't have much of a military, you can fit our entire army now into Wembley Stadium and still not fill Wembley. We don't have carriers that can operate independently of French equipment and French materials. So even if this slightly loopy-looking character who's now come to power in Argentina put 10 troops down, what would happen?
Well, what would happen? Because if you'd have gone back, I don't know, said 2 years ago and say, what do you think ever in this country this would happen, that would happen? Most of the stuff that's happened in this country over the last few years, you wouldn't have been able to make up. So these days, I actually don't rule out anything, which is not a good position to be in. I dread to think what might happen. This fella, by the way, this Javier that we're talking about in Argentina, he's referred to often as El Loco, the madman. Just to give you an idea of some of his policies, they are pretty out there, I can tell you now. He apparently, although he disputes this, apparently he wants to make it able to sell body parts, organs. He says that that isn't one of his policies, but many dispute that and say it absolutely is. He wants to ditch the local currency. He wants to privatise the state energy company. He wants to abolish abortion. You know, he's really been described as quite far right, isn't he?
Well, the thing is, if the title read, you know, we have a new far-left president for Argentina, it's never really a debate if somebody's far-left. They're always described, get all of these lunatics that are elected in places at times, they're always described as a far-right.
Well, we get that.
And, is far-right.
But don't forget...
There are far-left.
Of course there are. They're dictators, and they are... And like Stalin Stalin wasn't far-right, but he was still a dictator. Do you see what I mean? You get these extreme characters. And then, of course, you've got all of these things he's apparently going to do. We have no idea. I mean, fortunately, we don't have to select the president of our country in that way. I think the proof is in the pudding at the end of the day, and the electorate then will see if this person is the right one for them.
Well, I
wouldn't
can tell
fancy
you,
it myself, really, in this country.
He got voted in 56% of the votes, and it was quite a shock to some people. I can tell you that he took his position. What do you make to him, and what do you make to that Falklands question as well? We'll come back perhaps after the break on that one, but also I want to ask you, do you think we need more women in politics in this country? And also, are the Tories abandoning the young? You tell me.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquia, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's your new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight, alongside with the former MEP and life peer in the House of Lords, Baroness Jacqueline Foster, and the editor of Labour and Cut, Atul Hatwell. Like I said, talking about the Falklands earlier on, there's a real sense of people coming through the inbox that are all saying, basically, the Falklands are British. They've never been under Argentinian control, so this pillock, not my words, perhaps needs to get back in his box. El Loco, I said, that's how many people refer to him, the new president of Argentina. One of my viewers says Starmer would let the Falklands go to Argentina without a second thought. Not sure if I agree with that. Do you agree with that?
Not at all. Not at all. Strong defence and national security are an absolute cornerstone of what Keir Starmer stands for. You can criticise him on lots of things and you can have political disagreements with him, but national security is not something he's weak on.
I'd agree. Well, I just don't think they make them like they did with Thatcher anymore, because, I mean, literally, I was watching back some clips of her around that Falklands. She really did not mess about, did she, at all? Which leads me nicely Nice segue I've done there, Jackie, because Keir Starmer today has voiced his support for a campaign called Ask Her to Stand. And it's basically all about encouraging more women to get into politics at all different levels. He says when women are elected, they change the course of history. There you go, see? Just talking about Margaret Thatcher there, they don't make them like her, I don't think, anymore. Although many people get in touch with me, say about you, likening you to Margaret Thatcher and wishing that you was the Prime Minister of this country. But let me bring it back to Labour for just a second. Do you agree with Keir Starmer? Do we need more women in politics?
I think we need to keep the pressure up for women's representation, yes. And I think at the moment the Labour Party, the Labour Party has 199 MPs, 104 are women. They're a party where the majority of MPs who take the whip are women, so that's good progress. One thing I think that could be added, and it's a really important caveat to this, is it's class. It's not just middle-class women. It's working-class women and it's working-class men, and that class is a huge barrier to progression. And I think these campaigns are well-intentioned and right, but something that needs to be recognised
Is Angela Rayner passionate about that? Because obviously that's her background, isn't it?
She's absolutely passionate, but if you look at not just the Labour Party, but politics generally, it's a very middle-class profession. And to represent the country and the different kind of walks of life and experiences in the country, I think you've got to take account of class as well.
Why?
Because you can't look at just reflect every single detail of the country. You need people with different experiences. Angela Rayner brings a different voice. Her life experience is really important around the shadow cabinet table, and in government it will be important. The sorts of things we're seeing in the COVID inquiry, where basically all the decision making, the men just forgot that there's women with children, there's caring responsibilities. We saw it, someone like Patrick Vallance, who's a decent man, saying, and someone had a 2-year-old and was interrupted on a Zoom call. Well, that's what happens if you don't have childcare and when we lock down. And those sorts of considerations, lived experience is important. It's not everything, but if you just have a narrow cast of people running the country, then we have mistakes.
So what would you do then? Have quotas for all this stuff?
No. I think there's lots that happens before. So in the Labour Party, we had all women shortlists. It wasn't just quotas across the board, but where demonstrably selections hadn't worked, free selections, purely free selections hadn't worked, some action is required. There is a point, though, where one has to change the culture totally and you kind of take away the stabilisers.
Jacqueline?
Well, I don't really agree particularly. The whole point is, and we've just talked about Margaret Thatcher, and what did come through in the 80s was the mantra which was called equality of opportunity. And there's a difference between equality and equality of opportunity. And I'm on the side of equality of opportunity, which means that the state provides a good education system. It obviously drives then the aspiration of everybody. And where you are right, and I come from a blue-collar background, which is probably the same as Angela Rayner, and there were far more of us when I was a child, because most of the UK, certainly post-World War II, were not middle class. That middle class has grown over the time, but let's put that at one side. So I do find, Keir Starmer coming out, of course he's leading a party, but at the end of the day, I find it, actually, this sort of statement, a bit patronising. The Labour Party has been around now for, 120 years? They still haven't had a female leader. And it's astonishing. So you can have lots of MPs, but by the same token, we've got many more. We've got many more in the Conservative Party. But when you talk then about, all women shortlists, it's been necessary to do things like that. I know I came from an industry where I couldn't be promoted when I started in the airline industry and various other things. And we fought to make sure we had the equality of the same opportunities as our male colleagues. Industry had to do that too. So we've got female surgeons and lawyers, and, this has changed, irrevocably over the years. But I just think it's about, a lot of women will go into local council because it's local. It's a little bit harder if they want to come to Westminster because they're in London every week. But as I said, the answer is not lists here and lists there and just saying, the same old, same old. They will look at people around and think, oh, well, I'd like to do that if she can do that.
But do you agree with all women shortlists?
Not anymore, really, no. No, I'm
Did you agree with them before?
I'm very.
Did you agree with them at
Women
any
are
point?
not. Women are half the population. It's 2023, and we're not victims.
Yeah, but did you agree with them before?
I think there were times in certain areas, as I've said, we had great battles in industry over certainly the last 50 or 60 years, and in politics, where you could look at something and say, OK, we could justify that for a temporary period of time.
So I think actually there's not. So you agree with the principle, it's just the application and when. Now, I think most people would agree with that, which is you can't have shortlists in perpetuity. You have to change the culture.
Yeah, but I don't think we're in the ball game at this stage in 2023 now, where we need all-women shortlists in politics, frankly. I'm a meritocrat. I don't care. You know, if somebody's operating on me or somebody's representing me, I want the best person for the job. And therefore, I want to make sure that they've got equality of opportunity to put themselves in that position with the support.
Isn't it striking that so often the best person for the job, as it turns out, isn't a woman because the selection processes will filter out women at different stages?
Well, then the Labour Party need to look at their selection processes, as do maybe many, all parties. Ours has improved hugely. Widened
just
over
for the record, let me just give some
'cause
figures. 88 women, apparently, the Conservative, and 103 in Labour. How is Keir Starmer going to define what a woman is?
Yeah, quite.
To tick the boxes to say that he's got a woman.
I think he took his time, but he's got there, and he said, you know.
But what would he say? What is when we talk about we need more women in Parliament? What does that mean? I know what it means. To me, it means you need more adult human females if that is your strategy in Parliament. But I'm not sure that that's what he means.
I'm pretty sure he said in an interview when asked that question. Now, add the words adult human female. I don't think sort of. Kind of talking about the sort of tiny percentages here and there where there may be a sort of Casta Semenya or where there's a huge amount of merit in kind of going down that rabbit hole. He's been clear. But, you know, adult human female, women are, you know, biology matters. And I think that debate, such as it was, has been in the past.
If a guy self-identifying as a woman was to say, right, I want to be on one of your women's shortlists, would Labour permit that or not? So, like, for example, Eddie Izzard, a person that I massively respect, if Eddie Izzard was to say, I want to be a woman MP for Labour...
I am not the arbiter of the Labour Party rulebook, but I would be amazed if he did. And I think there would be an absolute furore.
Do you know what the question really should be? Because the question is always, you know, what is a woman? I'd like to ask the question, what is a man? How would you like to describe a man? And that's as straightforward as actually the description for a biological female. So this entire emphasis and this reticence to actually just say what a woman is, a biological adult female, from so many politicians, actually. But certainly when Keir was asked and others, I just find astonishing. It shouldn't even be up for debate. We do know. We know exactly.
The debate's done now.
We know exactly what.
But the debate's
what
not.
Female,
but the debate's
what a female
not done.
is.
The debate's not done, though, is it? I mean, there's a story in the papers today about a trans person who wants to play on a women's football team, and people have decided that they didn't want to field teams against that person. Now this person is saying that now they want to sue for discrimination.
When I say the debate's done, the debate's done at a senior political level. There's no one at the top of the Labour Party who's going to say that someone who is born a man and goes through puberty and then self-identifies as a female should be playing rugby.
Who is that Labour MP? You probably know. I can't remember. And I want to say Rosie Duffield. Is that the name?
Yeah.
Who needs security to do things like attend the Labour Party conference, etc. Because
listen, she's booed basically on her own benches. In the chamber.
How the Labour Party conducted itself on this a few years ago is a disgrace.
Yeah, you see,
but the Labour Party's still in the same position.
No, things have changed.
Miriam Kate, some months ago, was sitting on the Tory benches. She was making some comments as a very respected Conservative MP, and one of the Labour members of Parliament who was sort of booing
Lloyd Russell, who is...
He went and he crossed the floor, he sat on the Tory benches and he stirred her out. I'd have thrown him out the chamber. He intimidated.
That is disgraceful behaviour. That's disgraceful behaviour. That was condemned by multiple Labour MPs. When you have interviews with the shadow cabinet, the leadership of the Labour Party are absolutely clear.
Well, I'm sorry.
Biology matters.
I'm sorry, but
that debate from a few years ago, which was ungainly and unseemly,
It's not a few years ago. It's not a few years ago. This has been happening still over the last year, and Rosie Duffield's basically been, you know, blackballed to a degree by a lot of female Labour MPs as well. Anyway.
So, am I right? So are you saying that Labour don't support self-identification then?
I think in context. So if self-identification means that a man can self-identify as a woman and then play rugby or play football, no, Labour is not going to stand with that. But if someone wants to lead their life in their own time as they choose, I think no political party will stand in the way of that. There is a Conservative MP for Bridgend who identifies as a woman.
What, the one that said that they were trans when they got caught?
An issue.
Was it when there was a crash or something? Very briefly, are the Tories abandoning the young? I'm asking because the Young Conservative Network is basically distancing themselves from the Tory party, basically saying, I'm paraphrasing, but you're failing the youth.
Well, I'm not sure which ones the network are. I mean, we've got a few.
The Young Conservative Network, they're saying that they've been supporting young people within...
Well, I've supported, obviously, we used to have Young Conservatives, and we've got various groups, actually, of Young Conservative. I don't believe, of course, we're not abandoning our youth and our Young Conservatives. I mean, we have very brave Young Conservatives when you look at the university campuses, not least because they're so left-wing and they're so, bombarded with all of this sort of left-wing stuff on the university campuses, that you do find that these Young Conservatives, and they're very often quite small groups, are pretty brave kids, actually. I think our Young Conservatives are perfectly fine, and I don't think that the Labour Party would do any more for the young than the Conservative Party certainly try to do.
There isn't a great mystery here. If you look at schools where schools are closed because the buildings are rotten and buildings are collapsing, that's part of young people's experience. If you look at jobs where median wages are still behind 2008 in real terms, that's part of the young people's experience when they go into the labour market. When you look at housing, when young people are trying to get on the housing ladder and the average deposit is well in excess of £100,000, and it's how someone who's 21, 22 can save that amount of money is beyond.
Well, I'm sorry, because I couldn't afford to live in London.
It's not a mystery. It's not a mystery why, in that context, young people are not best pleased with the government of the past 13 years.
When I came to work in London at 20, I couldn't afford to live in central London, and I worked for a big company. There's an assumption that, well, if I want to live there, I should be able to afford it. It doesn't work like that, and certainly in certain parts of the country. There's loads of parts of the country, though, where obviously properties and various things are not quite so extortionate as they are in London. We know that. But as I said, of course, I don't... you can't sit and say one party supports young people and another party doesn't.
What I was quoting wasn't a London figure, it was a national figure.
Well, this Young Conservative Network, basically what they're saying is that they believe that conservative ideals are popular with the younger generation. However, our current present policy offering to them is less than inspiring. They quote things like housing, planning reform, childcare and education issues that are critical to them, that they say are still not been adequately addressed. Carol Vorderman, she was getting in on the act. She was saying, actually, can you imagine the shame nowadays of any young person saying they belong to what she calls a corrupt Conservative party? I've got to say, there does seem to be an awful lot of shaming these days of anyone that has the audacity to be of the right of centre politically, whereas if you're left of centre or left, that's absolutely fine. If you're to the right, apparently not so fine. Why is that? Fascinated on your thoughts on that one. I have a lot that I want to cover with you guys, so don't go anywhere. I want your thoughts on the topics that we have been discussing, GBViews at gbnews.com, but I want to, after the break, ask you, if you're disabled, do you think it is your duty to work if you can? Tell me your thoughts and I'll see you in 2.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Are Queer, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new t-shirt.
It's your new t-shirt.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Dewbs & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these 3.
Oh!
No, thank you. My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Hi there, Michelle Dewberry till 7. Jacqueline Foster and Athol Hatwell remain alongside me. Bev on Twitter says, hello, you're watching from Florida. What a treat. I do like to hear where you guys are watching and listening from. You're very welcome tonight. Molly on Twitter says, Michelle, re women in politics, we need to stop putting labels on people. We simply need more of the right people in the job, regardless of anything else. That sentiment is coming through thick and fast. Nikki says, all these calls for more women in politics is a bit silly. There's nothing stopping women from running to be in office if they want to. If you want to do it, put your hat in the ring. I've done it twice. I'm not sure I'd recommend it. It's certainly not for the faint-hearted, I could tell you that. Anyway, lots to come. I was asking you as well, do you think the Tories are neglecting the young and focusing instead too much on the elderly? Mary says, I'm a pensioner and I've worked all my life. Basically, you're saying you don't think you've had any help or consideration from the government. Yeah, no, is the short answer. Many people are not saying. Ian says, I believe the Tories are grossly neglecting the elderly while pandering to the young when it comes to gender and work and climate, etc., etc. Well, there you go. Now, we all know, don't we, that autumn statement is almost upon us. Now, we've been focusing a lot in terms of what potentially is and isn't going to be in there. Now, speaking today, UK Minister has upset quite a few people because apparently the emphasis of what she was saying, that is, if you are disabled, there is a duty on you to work if you're able to. This is Laura Trott that was saying this, Chief Secretary to the Treasury. What do you make to this?
Well, it's not straightforward, not least because I have worked during my lifetime with many people who've been disabled, some very physically disabled, and they've worked in wheelchair, they've used wheelchairs and everything. And there always appears to be an assumption that if somebody has a disability, that they actually want to just sit at home. Mm. And that is not, in my view, the reality, because an awful lot of people who do have really quite chronic disabilities, as well as mild disabilities, like to be out there and they like to be part of a workforce. Now, clearly, there are a proportion of people who will be on sick benefit, and we do have a couple of million, I think, of working age who are currently sort of drawing sickness benefit. and a proportion of them will never be able to work, and I think people accept that. But notwithstanding, there are also, I think, a lot of people out there. We know that there is fraud in the system. We can't shy away from that. And we know for a fact, and it's gone on for a long time. I think the government needs to really crack on where there is fraud, and there is evidence of that. People do report these things, because it costs the Treasury billions, actually. Because I would like to see the money then put into those who are genuinely needing the help. That additional funding then can go in the right place. So that's my view. I don't think there's one simple, easy answer, Michelle. I think it's a wide-ranging issue.
Jackie says, no, it is not a duty for a disabled person to work. She says, what a horrible question. If a person can't cope, then fair enough, fine. If they want to work and they can without suffering, that's also fine. But as for being a duty, i.e. you're trying to make people feel guilty if they cannot work, no way. You say, what a state we are in. And she says, by the way, those in power have plenty of perks and handouts. Get lost, she says, at all.
I think it's a well-established principle of the way our welfare state works, that whoever you are, if you can work, you should, and you should work to the extent that you can. And I think the challenges happen when, in twofold. One, in the detail of implementation, where often frontline staff aren't necessarily equipped to deal with some of the intricacies and the clinical intricacies of the challenges people face. It's hard to find the right match of jobs sometimes. But I also think the kind of rise in people on sickness benefits is a corollary of the challenges we have facing with our National Health Service. If it takes longer to get treatment, then more people are going to fall into not being able to work. There's a cycle here which is sort of repeating back from the 80s, where in the areas which deindustrialised, particularly mining areas, there was a huge rise in people on disability benefit because with musculoskeletal conditions. Now, if they'd been treated within 6 weeks, they'd have been back to work, but because it took so long to get to them, what was a temporary disability became a lot longer term and a lot harder to unpick. And I think in terms of actually tackling this, probably the locus here should sit in more effective health interventions than a work intervention, because our work interventions are already set up where if you can work and don't, you are sanctioned.
Claire says, I personally think it's everybody's duty to work, whether disabled or not, because it improves your mental health, having something to do. Paul says, how disgusting, a duty. We are not slaves. So let's see what the courts have to say about this. Why are disabled people being demonised by the media and politicians? Susie said, I had a bleed on the brain in 2018. I've applied for numerous jobs, but nobody will give her a chance, she says, even though she's applying for jobs requiring less qualifications. She's volunteered for charities, in nurseries, etc. And I think from what you're saying, you've still not been able to find work, which I think is a real shame. John says if anyone is capable of work physically and mentally without hardship, then absolutely they should be looking. Malcolm says, I'm a disabled man with MS and I have to work part-time because benefits just do not cover all of my costs. Well, there you go. Keep your thoughts coming in. gbviews@gbnews.com. Did you see the argument that's raged today about the University Challenge episode, which featured someone wearing the Palestinian flag colours and having a blue octopus? Was it blatant anti-Semitism? You tell me.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, welcome back. Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, till 7 o'clock. The former MEP and life peer in the House of Lords, Baroness Jacqueline Foster, and the editor of Labour and Cut, Atul Hatwell, alongside me. We're just talking about whether or not people have a so-called duty to work if they're disabled. Sheila's been in touch on Twitter. My son had a brain disease at 22. He had to learn to walk and talk again. Then he got myocarditis. He got fit again, joined the Navy. 6 months later, he got an autoimmune disease. He now has 3 chronic illnesses, but he's still working full-time, she says. Respect to your son, and I wish him all the best. Now, the BBC has sparked outrage over claims that one of the teams, basically, on University Challenge that was aired last night, apparently used an anti-Semitic mascot. There's also been criticism that the person was wearing the flag colours of the Palestinian flag. What do you make of this, Jacqueline? I saw you tweeting quite a lot about it.
Well, frankly, I was horrified because there's footage of when they're Christchurch College, Oxford, and they were on a round. There was a round at an earlier date, and the young student in question was wearing a hijab, which is absolutely fine. They had like a cuddly toy that was at the front of on their desk. They all have these things. And then the next thing we have, the next round, and apart from her clothing, people can wear red and green, of course they can.
Yeah, let's put it back on the screen
there,
as well.
There on the right in front of her is a blue octopus. Now, you know, it doesn't take you more than about 2 minutes to find out what that actually means. And
well,
notwithstanding,
some of my viewers might not know.
Notwithstanding, it's a trope. It was I think first brought to I think to the public eye around about 1938 when in Nazi Germany, obviously when the Hitler boys were making their way through the country and all of the hatred. You know, you ended up with Kristallnacht, and obviously these pogroms against the Jews took place. And it is a well-known indicator of what is pure Nazi anti-Semitism. So the fact that we're looking at the particular student, who is not, I wouldn't imagine in a million years, a stupid, naive person, who's reading astrophysics and is sitting there, and they move from one cuddly toy to a blue octopus right in front of them, I just found, is this a coincidence? And I'm very sorry, but I love to give people a benefit of the doubt, but it doesn't look like a coincidence to me. And the BBC should have seen that before that was actually aired.
Well, you mentioned the BBC. This is what they had to say. They said, we're aware of inaccurate claims being made online in relation to last night's episode of University Challenge, and we utterly condemn the abuse that has been posted and shared. This episode was filmed in March. The mascot is one of many chosen by the team during the course of the series and is one of their favourite animals. The jacket worn by one of the contestants was bought from a high street retailer. It has no connection to any flag at all. What do you make to it all?
I think there's an echo here of some of the furore happened around Marks and Spencer's. They have an ad that's filmed in August, and suddenly there's the idea that they're burning bits of the Palestinian flag. I think people need to calm down. She was, red and green are common colours, and context matters. If this student has a history of anti-Semitic abuse, which I don't think there's any reports of. If there is some broader agenda, then yes, then attention needs to be paid. But to paraphrase Freud, sometimes an octopus is just an octopus.
Isn't it?
Oh, this is not a coincidence. Why would you choose a blue octopus?
Because millions of cuddly octopuses are sold around up and down the country.
Of course they would.
Lots of children have cuddly octopuses.
As I said, I didn't comment particularly on her clothes. People choose all sorts of different colours for their clothes.
The act of having a cuddly octopus isn't anti-Semitic.
We'll have to agree to disagree. That is my view. And I was astonished, actually, when I saw it, because it was just so obvious. Certainly it was so obvious to me, and it was so obvious to an awful lot of other people as well. It is a horrendous trope, and certainly, showing it at this time as well, what's happened over the last 6 weeks, it was only aired. Surely, to goodness, an editor or somebody would have checked that before it was actually aired last night and could have maybe raised the issue.
At no point has anyone said there's any intent on her behalf.
Well, I'm not talking... I have no idea what's in people's heads. We can work on what we see and we think about what we're going to say. And from my point of view...
It was filmed in March.
I didn't see... It doesn't matter whether it was filmed in March. It was filmed in March.
So you'd have a zero-tolerance approach to cuddly octopuses?
Well, you're now just being a bit ridiculous because I don't have zero-tolerance approach to pretty well most things. What I do have a serious zero-tolerant approach to is anti-Semitism and anything that actually, particularly over the last 6 weeks, which is then brought to the fore, which exacerbates a situation that we have in this country.
Well, you know what? As always, you guys at home can have the final thoughts and words on that one. That is a conversation I'm sure that we will have again, unfortunately, in the not-too-distant future. For now, Atul, thank you for your company. Jacqueline, thank you for yours too. As always, thank you for yours. Don't go anywhere. Richard Tice up next. Night-night.
Good evening, welcome to your latest GB News weather update with me, Annie from the Met Office. It'll be staying cloudier through tomorrow with some rain moving in from the north, but still some sunshine on offer across southern areas with that high pressure still dominating, the ridge extending across many areas of England and Wales. But further north, we've got a weather front in charge throughout this evening, and that'll stay in charge into Wednesday and Thursday as well. So we've got rain arriving across much of western Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland as well. Further south, it'll stay dry tonight, some mist and fog developing and temperatures falling lower than last night, as low as 2 or 3 perhaps in some southern counties. So a bit of a colder, mistier start on Wednesday morning, but the sunshine will come out throughout the afternoon once again, so not a bad day for the time of year. Rather different story though further north, with some rain persisting, particularly across the far north of Scotland, the northwest in particular, where the rain totals will start to build up. But despite the rain, it will be fairly mild for the time of year, as high as 14 degrees in northeastern Scotland. Then Thursday, there's little change for many areas, apart from the far north, where that front does then clear through, and we've got much colder air behind it, so we could see some snow showers starting to fall over the hills, and generally there just will be a cold feel to the wind. That cold feel will become more widespread into Friday and will last into the weekend, with temperatures falling to single figures.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
No, thank you.